Date on Mom here, grown mom with grown kids, and today I'm talking about Proverbs 26:4. Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you will be like him also. So when you put this in the context of parenting, okay, so sometimes we can be fools as parents, and certainly our kids can be fools as well. And we can speak in ways that are foolish or have angry outbursts or be unreasonable. And so in that case, it's like you're being a fool. And the scripture is telling us, do not answer a fool according to his folly. So don't get in the same type of conversation that the person is having with you. So as a parent, don't fall in to the type of conversation that our kids want us to have, right? So if they're feeling emotional or they're angry because you said no, or they're fighting with their sibling or whatever it may be, we don't want to fall into that level of conversation. You're a parent. You should rise above that level of conversation. Now, we're people too, and we're sinful. So we're going to make mistakes. Sometimes our emotions are going to get the best of us, and we're going to do something or say something we shouldn't. That's why there's forgiveness, and there's apologies, and you can make things right. But I'm talking about ongoingly, not the times you slip up here and there, but ongoingly. You don't want to bicker with your children. You don't want to argue with your children. I mean, it's going to happen sometimes. Again, we're people. But your ongoing goal is not to bicker or argue with your children, because that's folly. It's foolish behavior that we need to grow out of more and more and more. And we need to model for them how to grow out of that more and more. So I'm going to tell you some things you want to do. You want to be an example for your kids. So when you're conversing, you want them to be able to look at you and say, oh, okay, that's the way I should be conversing with people. I should be speaking respectfully. I shouldn't be losing my temper. I shouldn't be, calling names or using inappropriate language. This is not what I should be doing. As a parent, certainly that's the example I want to set, and so that my kids can follow that, model that, and learn how to do that as well. Also, you want to sometimes take a break. So your child says something foolish, and it triggers you to want to just say something or yell or argue or deal with it, right? So if you have a lot of emotion going on as a parent, that's not the time to have a conversation. I know this is easier said than done. But again, we're here talking while we're calm-minded in order to get some tips on what to do when life is happening, right? So our children are going to be a lot more emotional than us because they're young and underdeveloped, and they're starting to come into their growth and their maturity. In theory, we should be more emotionally stable than our kids. And again, sometimes we're under stress and duress and we blow. And again, there's times to apologize, and we can talk about that later. But in the meantime, sometimes you have to take a break from the conversation. Your child says something emotionally charged or something foolish. It may be the time for you to just say, you know what? We can't talk about that right now. I can't talk about that right now because you're not in a good state of mind to talk about that. It could also be you can throw out a distraction. So your child's saying something foolish, trying to drag you into some kind of bickering or something that you shouldn't be involved with. You may distract and say,
oh, you know what? I forgot. I need to go do such and such right now.
And just kind of like distract. Or,
hey, didn't you need to do such and such?
Or distract the conversation such that you can kind of snap that habit that was about to happen. Or break what was the cycle of what was about to happen, right? So that's a really good skill to use. The other thing I was going to say is be sure that when you're talking to your child and your child is talking foolishly, be sure you know where you stand. So don't be wishy-washy yourself, because then you fall into whatever silly conversation they're trying to get you involved with. You need to take a stand. You need to know what you're talking about. You need to know what you think, and you need to have a clear delineation. So when your child starts acting that way, you have somewhere to stand and some way to kind of stop the madness. You want to model conversation. Model it. Show your child what is it like to have a conversation. And I say this is so important, parents. This is so important. Our kids are mini versions of us. They're going to do what they see us doing. Whatever you want to say or what rules you want to set down, that's fine. But they're going to do what they see us doing. So if we are argumentative, or disagreeable, bring up the past a lot, I told you so, if we're critical, if we have fits of outrage, we're angry and we rage all the time, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to learn that from us. So we need to be an example for our children, show them how to converse. And if we're not doing that, believe me, you are going to be arguing with a mini version of yourself, because that's what we do as parents. We teach that. So it's important to teach them how to get out of a conversation. They say something foolish and it's tempting you to say, "What are you talking about?" and get into it, right? Instead, you want to show them, how do you get out of a conversation that's not helpful, right? So you can teach your child that. When they speak foolishly, you want to rely on the proverb that says, "Do not answer a fool according to his folly." So you're going to show your child, you know what, here's what I'm going to do. One of a couple of things. You can, number one, basically reiterate what you already said your decision was. Okay, this is what I said before you started talking foolish. Or this was what was happening before you started talking foolish. Take it back to what was happening before the foolish talk. The other thing you can do is you can just tell your child, we're not going to talk about this right now. We can talk about this later. And then do agree to talk about it later. What you're probably going to discover, here's the thing about foolishness. Foolishness, it lives in the moment. It doesn't have a lot of power later, right? So if you say, okay, let's talk about this later. How about later on tonight, after the game, after you finish your practice, or after I finish my, dinner or whatever, let's sit down and talk about this. And your child agrees. More likely than not, that conversation is either not going to happen at all, because once the emotion passes and the foolishness passes, the conversation really doesn't have to be had. And they won't want to have it later. Or they'll realize, oh, well, never mind, forget about it. Because they realize it was foolish and there's no conversation later. You may end up having the conversation later. And if you do, that's good, because you're both level-headed, you're calm, you're not in the moment, and you can have a good, reasonable conversation, learn some things, grow and practice some things for future conversations. So it's a win-win in that case. The other option for you is, when your child is being foolish, joke. Comedy really, really works. Now, I don't mean joke, make fun of your child or make them feel small or, embarrass them. Not that kind of joke. But like the silliness, if you have that kind of relationship, the relationship you have with your kids. If you have that kind of relationship, I definitely do, where we can be silly and goofy. And so they'll be saying something and I can say something back and we can just make it funny somehow, or remember something from our past that somebody always says such and such a thing, and you can kind of connect, and it just disperses the whole foolishness altogether. Comedy, really powerful.